This one's a little bit out of left field, but I kind of like it. Hey, Dylan in Albuquerque, you're on the air with us now for Truth Wanted. What's up, Dylan?
Hey, can you hear me all right?
I can hear you just fine. Just fine.
Oh, okay, good. I'm talking on my headphones.
Yeah, this is
If
cool.
there's any problems, let me know.
No, this is great. I'm looking at what our call screener has put here, and moral implications of adoption. Now, that is something I really want to hear your take on. What is that about, Dylan?
Yeah, I actually just wanted to kind of continue a conversation that you had a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, when Cosmic Skeptic was on.
Yes.
It was the last call you had with the caller was named Kapia, and you guys were talking about antinatalism.
Yes.
And I actually think Alex O'Connor, as smart and as great of a philosopher as he is, he kind of pulled the whole conversation into the weeds.
So I'm going to start off with this by saying, Dylan, I agree with you. Like that day that we talked to Alex, I remember being particularly tired that day. And I remember thinking, we could definitely take this conversation somewhere else. But we had a lot of calls that night. We were going on, and you don't always get to say what you want to say on here and stuff. I ultimately, at the end of the day, I do disagree with Alex's position on antinatalism. Maybe you're going to give a position that maybe emboldens mine. We'll see. But what's your take on it? Why do you think Alex was wrong when he disagreed with antinatalism as a philosophy?
Yeah, so, I do think there's a refinement that might be due in the term antinatalism.
Okay.
If you look it up online or in general, the way Alex O'Connor explained it is if you're an antinatalist, you hate babies. Babies are bad. No babies, nowhere. And I think we're kind of in a different situation where 50 years ago, the word atheist meant, oh, you hate God. No God, no way, no how.
Sure.
And now the word atheist just means, oh, I'm, maybe approaching the idea of God skeptically. And maybe antinatalism is similar. It's that I'm not saying no babies, no one should have babies, but I would say that I think you had said this at one point, that it's kind of a moral imperative to at least consider adoption.
Sure.
And I feel like I've come to the same conclusion that you have, that me and my fiance have talked about it quite a bit. And if we ended up having a biological child, something will have gone terribly wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That is our first goal is to adopt children.
Yeah, there's always going to be that possibility that something goes wrong with birth and stuff. Now, when you talk about something going wrong, that doesn't mean that that person is not as valuable as other people in society and stuff. I see this when we talk about the anti-vax movement. I think there's a lot of people, when that discussion comes up, that they actually actively dislike autistic people, and that's why that no, seriously, I really think that that's why they are so strongly against us saying vaccines cause autism, because I think that that
would be the worst.
That's the worst thing that could be for their kids and stuff. But anyway, that's a side thing, Dylan. I want you to continue with what you were saying.
Right. I wouldn't dislike my child.
Sure.
I would just, for my personal plan in life,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the morally correct decision to adopt children.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't think everybody has to adopt children, but I did have kind of something that might help codify this moral argument.
Ooh, okay.
And I wanted to kind of present that to you and see what you think.
Lay it on us. Let's go.
So my first question to both of y'all, I guess, is, do you feel like the world is overpopulated with humans?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Not a trick question.
Okay.
No. We'll see where it goes.
No, it's not a trick question.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that's that's
All right. So
where
by
my
overpopulated, let's say this: by overpopulated, you mean we do not have enough resources currently, or we're not efficient enough with our resources to provide for every human on Earth. Yes.
That's exactly what I mean.
Okay.
And there's those. If you've ever seen a footprint calculator, or how many Earths does it take to provide for everybody the way that that I live my life, or that anybody lives their life. And you can see that for most, even a not luxurious lifestyle here in America, it's not sustainable for the planet.
No.
There are too many people for everybody to live in any level of luxury and comfort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's kind of my first point. My second point would be that, would you agree with me when I say that all children are valuable?
Ooh. All children are valuable.
All human beings are valuable.
Yes, I think I would. Yeah.
No, that's
also not a trick question.
Right. Again.
No, not a trick question. Mm-hmm. I would say all children are valuable, all babies. I personally do not think all humans are valuable, but okay.
Okay.
We'll table that part of the discussion.
Let's table that one.
Okay.
Let's table that one.
So I think those 2 points kind of lay the groundwork for whether or not people should adopt, or at least consider adoption.
I would tend to agree with you. Did you have more to say? Do you have anything?
Well, I think it's specifically more important here in America, where we have, most people here do live a level of comfort and luxury that's not available to people around the world.
Yes.
And so I think that adopting from your community and also from around the world is kind of a moral imperative, because you are improving people's lives who would otherwise lead, maybe not a bad life, but a life that is going to have a statistically higher chance of being full of pain and, negative experiences.
Sure. I have a lot of thoughts about this, but I don't want to take up all the time here. Gayle, do you have any?
Dylan, I'll confess I haven't thought about this as deeply as you have, and I really appreciate your insight, and it's something that I want to read about and research a little bit more, but I'll let you guys kind of toss that around a little bit.
Sure. Well, antinatalism is a subject that we've talked about on the show. For those of you who just aren't super aware of this is just a philosophy or an idea that children or having children shouldn't be something that we should necessarily want as people. I would identify with that to an extent. I don't plan on having kids myself. I've talked strongly about adoption. I feel very strongly about it, and that's hopefully something that I can do one day. And it comes from my ethical stance as a secular humanist, and my ideas of ethics kind of boil down to consequentialism, in the sense that, well, I know that by putting another mouth in this world to feed, there is the possibility for harm. Yes, there's a possibility for pleasure, but there's a possibility for harm, and there's a possibility of things that are outside of my control. We talked about birth defects. We talked about possible pains that happen when someone comes into the world. And there's already kids out there who don't have parents, who don't have the social network and support systems needed to support themselves and raise themselves. And so if I have the means, would I not, and I do, and if I value children and people as much as I think that I do, would I not be compelled to adopt? Would I not be compelled to alleviate some of that suffering? Now, you've made a great point in that I definitely don't think everybody should adopt. I've met people who have adopted, and I wish that they didn't. I don't think that they made the best parents for people, But if I think that I'm good enough, and if the state thinks I'm good enough maybe to adopt, then I think that's something that I'd like to do, because I do want to alleviate suffering, and I want to be able to provide the means of a life that's already here to graduate and grow from that. Now, of course, a lot of us argue that we have this biological imperative to adopt, and of course, most human cultures across the globe are very pro. Yes, you should have kids, with some very notable exceptions in religious circles in particular. But really, when you hit the nail on the head when it's like, when you talk about antinatalists, it's like this: oh, you just hate babies, or you're just immature, you're just selfish. But really, I think you would probably agree with me, Dylan. My understanding is this is the most unselfish thing I can do, because I'm not making a kid for my own sake. This isn't a narcissistic thing. I'm not saying I just want to have a son just because I want one. because there's consequences to that. And instead, I'd rather take someone who's already here on this earth, who's already developing and needs support, because children need adults. That is a fact. Human children cannot live on their own. And that's what I want to do. I'd like to do that. So
yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a huge point. And I actually, when I was listening to the previous conversation with Alex O'Connor, mm-hmm. I kind of thought he was being a little childish by not. The point of antinatalism, as you explained it, mm-hmm. is not that nobody should have people, but that there are already people who need help and people who need love. Mm-hmm. Those children, just because you didn't biologically start that, I don't need my own nasty biological nonsense to make me love a child.
For sure.
I think the fact that there are people who are already alive and in a situation where they don't have love and a comfortable home and, the things that we consider necessary.
Yes.
I think that is what makes adoption a really important moral discussion, at least.
Absolutely.
And I do think it's kind of strange how little it gets talked about.
I agree,
and
Dylan.
That's why, I just really wanted to talk about it with you. I heard your viewpoints. I got so excited. I called my fiance after the whole thing. I played her that whole conversation. I mean, we were, and I've heard you mention that before, but it is great just to hear a little, to hear one person who's calling in and a host who have the same opinion that, yes, adoption is at least worth looking at, not just because, I'm infertile or my wife can't, physically can't have a baby or whatever. It's like,
right.
Adoption doesn't have to only be the last resort.
Adoption isn't this last resort option, and I hate that that's what it's often portrayed as. It's like, oh, you did this because you couldn't have kids. Well, no, I did this because I wanted to help another human being grow and develop that's already in this world that couldn't do it on their own. I definitely, for me, I do view it as kind of a moral imperative, Dylan. I agree, and I wish we could have expanded on that conversation with Alex a bit more. Like I said, I remember just being very exhausted that night, and Alex is very eloquent, and he can be very on point, and we agree about a lot of things, and it's okay that we don't always see the same thing. If I had to talk to Alex again, that would probably be the one conversation I would like to revisit with him, because I did feel like we could have made some more ground. Yeah.
I think it was really interesting, a lot of the things he said, but what I was like, I can still take this guy seriously. Because at some point in this conversation, he said, well, this is new to me. This particular brand of antinatalism is new. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, think about it. Come back later, because I do think he's, a very eloquent, very intelligent young man. And I've watched, pretty much every video he's posted. But it was funny that I kind of, for most of that episode, you were the comic relief, keeping everybody, you're just keeping things moving, keeping things light. And then you got into this conversation that I think is very, very important. Mm-hmm. And it was just funny to see the philosophy major not really, it seemed unequal. His approach to that idea versus the rest of them seemed a little uneven.
Oh man, we're talking shit about Alex now. Ooh, the philosophy major can't handle it. Clip that to him. We gotta send it. That's it.
Him next for a debate.
No, but
I did have some other stuff, but I can leave it for later.
Yeah, we do want to get to some of the other callers.
Pick this up again.
Yeah, absolutely, Dylan. We do want to wrap things up here. We are getting starting to run a little late here, but Dylan, I'm so glad you called in, because it is a conversation I thought about afterwards. I was like, I wish I could say more, and I'm glad I got to talk about it a bit more with you. And I'd love to hear whatever else you have to say. And as always, you can email me after the show and do all kinds of stuff. So Dylan, thanks again for calling, and thanks for your thoughtful responses and your codification. I like it. I like what you got going on there.
Well, thank you. I mean, it is. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. It's just a great show that you got, and keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks again, Dylan. We'll hear from you next time. So there we go. Sorry you weren't as involved in that one.
Yeah. I just haven't given as much thought as you all have. Interesting.
There you go. Well, I'm sure your perspective must be a bit different as a mother.
A little bit, and it's generationally. It's also different too. We, 30 years ago when I was having my children, things were a little bit different, and so I understand. And the overriding thought is, how much responsibility do we have to our fellow human beings? That adoption is a part of that, but in addition to that, what's it take to be a good person? What does it mean to be a good person? Do our political borders mean anything to us, or is it being a good person to everybody that has needs? It's a broad conversation to have, and adoption is a part of it.
Sure,
it's interesting.
Yeah, and what does it mean to be a family too?
Right.
What does it mean to? Because I consider a lot of I'm closer with a lot of friends now than I am with some of my family, and I think that's very common amongst millennials these days. We kind of develop those kinds of ties, and so especially here in the United States, and it's like gay marriage is a thing now, and that's a different kind of family than what people have been used to for a long time.
Well, and the economy impacts how we live and who's in our home and how we bond. Yeah, it's a big, broad conversation.
For sure. I do want to get to these next few calls here so that Gayle can go home, because she flew in here today, and I know she's tired, and she's tired of hearing me talk for sure. But
I love it.